I see hypnosis, meditation, psychedelics as just being different vehicles taking people to the same destination. And so, in our research that we are publishing in the next couple months, we wanted to see, okay, can we facilitate a complete mystical experience without any use of psychedelic substances?
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back to another episode of Changing the Channel. So today I have Dr. Cameron Alldredge. He is a licensed clinical psychologist and researcher at the Mind Body Medicine Research Lab at Baylor University, which is one of the world leading research labs on clinical hypnosis. So welcome to the show, Cameron. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I can already feel, just based on the pre-show talk, that this could be a pretty foundational conversation. So I'm excited for everybody listening to get into that. But I think where I really want to get started today is just on, from a, clinician, from a scientific standpoint, where is the scientific community at with what is consciousness? Where does consciousness kind of come from? And maybe if you have a little bit of background as far as how this understanding has been evolving over the last couple of decades or even the last century or so, just so people kind of understand what is happening behind somewhat closed doors in the higher education fields when it comes to consciousness.
Love it. This topic really can be broken up in a couple different ways. There seems to be this division as far as consciousness goes because nobody really knows exactly what it is, how it works. There's this concept called the hard problem of consciousness. Basically, we fall short in materialistic descriptions or explanations for how consciousness works. So neural mechanisms, brain chemistry, all of that can do some good work in how to explain consciousness and describe it, but it doesn't get the full picture. And so it kind of gets broken up into non-local theories of consciousness and then more materialistic. So the materialistic being that it is all brain-based, that it is all neurological, and then the non-local theories saying that consciousness actually exists independent of the physical brain. And I definitely lean more toward the non-local type of theories in saying that there are things and experiences I've had and beliefs that I have that cannot be explained by material or physical means.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to the non-local understanding of what consciousness is, can you go a little bit deeper in that? Like, uh, I know a lot of people talk about a field of consciousness and that we're accessing that field. Like, from your perspective, what does that really mean, non-local consciousness?
Yeah, I really think it's kind of a fancy scientific way of talking about this difference between the body and the spirit. And I have a very spiritual religious background. And so I really like that we're bringing spirituality into the conversation, even if we call it non local consciousness. But to me, I feel like our spirits, that is our consciousness. And we are having, there's that classic quote that we are spiritual beings having a human experience rather than sometimes we're humans having spiritual experiences. I think we are inherently spiritual in nature, and that we can have this temporary physical body that allows us to experience life on earth, but that there is more beyond that because down to the core, we are more spiritual beings.
The journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet, and you've got a powerhouse combination to build muscle, improve digestion, and fuel your energy levels, all while promoting deeper sleep. Plus, Purium is mission driven with planetary health in mind. They're proud to lead the way in a plastic free movement using biodegradable packaging as much as possible. True health freedom starts here. Experience the power of this regenerative healing system for yourself and witness your own transformation take place. You get 60 days to try it. And if you truly don't feel any benefit, you get fully refunded. I have personally been using the daily Core 4 products and have noticed an increase in my energy and the depth of my sleep. Use the link in the descriptions to get started today and receive at least $50 off your first order over $75. Yeah. Now is your studies or your papers kind of getting into this idea of like the quantum aspect of space time, that everything is basically connected through quantum entanglement, and that when you go into maybe these altered states or these non-ordinary states of consciousness, that you're basically just accessing a part of you that existed, whether in the past or the future or in some parallel reality, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, actually. That absolutely. And the way that I feel like quantum elements come into the picture is I really like there's a theory called the 0 point field theory, that there's this 0 point field that permeates all throughout the universe, and that's the energy that our consciousness is carried by. And it's through that field that we can access exactly what you're saying, like this transcendence of time and space, these perhaps other dimensions, other realities that are there and existing. We just filter those out because of the way that our physical brain works. So it's like this filtration system that's actively working against our experience of that field.
So let's get a little bit into that. I love that you brought up that filtration system because I talk about this a lot in my meditations even. I think a lot of people don't realize what the default mode network, what the reticular activating system are really doing. And it's just filtering out. Some estimates are 95, some estimates are 99.9% of all the information that your body is able to access. It's filtering all that out so that essentially you can eat, sleep, have a roof over your house, to satisfy those lower level needs that you need. Your filter system is basically filtering out everything else. And when we get into that altered state of consciousness, like, is there any scientific proof that that's basically what's happening? That we're either going around the default mode network and the reticular activating system, or that it's shutting off and it's or opening its aperture, something along those lines.
Yeah, there's really great, especially in the clinical hypnosis literature, really great studies showing us the neurobiology of this state of hypnosis and other non ordinary states of consciousness. But it's interesting how, even in states of meditation or people who are using psychedelics or in hypnosis, we see that there are these very stark changes. And one, for example, with hypnosis is that brain activity is not decreased in any sense. It's not that there's this paucity or the scarcity of brain activity. The brain is very active and there's a lot going on. It's just happening in a way that is not the same as when we're in normal waking consciousness. So there is this shift that we're seeing between how people are when they're in normal waking consciousness to now these, the different systems like you mentioned, the default mode network. I know the salience network, that's another important one. Those are having differences that allow us to access what is always there that usually gets filtered out, just like you said.
Yeah, it's fascinating to be alive at this time where science is again catching up to this idea that the mystics and the spiritual leaders have been talking about for centuries, since the beginning of written history. We've had these experiences, and they've often been the ones that have been written about, were these mystical experiences that these humans have gone through. And Graham Hancock and some of these other um, historians that are looking at history through a different lens than most of the Western world has been looking at, is the idea that the pyramids are basically um, this gigantic building that gets the person that's laying in the king's chamber into the most altered state of consciousness that they can possibly be in, like the most non-ordinary state that they could possibly be in. And I'm sure there's some research. I don't know if you've looked at that, but basically that's
No, but it sounds fascinating.
yeah, that's the basic idea that, even humans like Napoleon, the reason that he went into that chamber was because he knew through his studies that it brought him to this state where he could connect with, whether it's a past or a future version of himself, or the universe as a whole. These were the experiences that he was looking to have. And tons of humans along the path have kind of gone into that. And there's people even today that, like, Matthias de Stefano, who's huge spiritual kind of leader in that realm, and he's gone multiple times into that king's chamber, and he's experienced these, what people call, super mystical experiences. And it's just fascinating to kind of see how that plays out.
I really like that, and I think to your point, like it's a great time where these are starting to become more part of the conversation, especially with this renaissance in psychedelic assisted therapy, where it's just like the psychedelics are just blowing up in the field of psychology and psychotherapy. And I'm stoked because that's bringing more spirituality and these mystical experiences back into the conversation. And that is exciting because I think we will be better for it.
Mm. So let's talk a little bit about maybe the differences between the psychedelic mystical experience and maybe the hypnotic mystical experience, or the meditative mystical experience. From your papers, from the research that you've done, are there major differences? Is there, what are the differences between getting into these non-ordinary states and the mechanisms or the ways that we go about doing that?
I love it. I think the short answer to that question is I see hypnosis, meditation, psychedelics as just being different vehicles taking people to the same destination. And so, in our research that we are publishing in the next couple months, we wanted to see, okay, can we facilitate a complete mystical experience without any use of psychedelic substances? And we use the same kind of questionnaires that they use in psychedelic studies, like the Mystical Experience Questionnaire 30, looking at those four different domains of it being mystical, this sense of awe, unity, and this transcendence of time and space, that it's ineffable, right? So there are these, and that it's a positive mood, I guess, is the fourth one. And so, seeing across the board, can we reach that same level of a mystical experience that somebody would get on a high dose of psilocybin? And what we found in our initial piloting studies is that absolutely we can. We'd give them eye masks for this experience. We wanted to make it feel as much of a special experience as possible. And there were some participants who had soaked the eye mask because they were, sobbing so much because of how powerful and spiritual this experience was for them. And we didn't give them any drugs or any psychedelics for that. That was just through this this hypnotic process that I made up that I thought, hey, maybe this will this will lead to a mystical experience. And we were very encouraged by the results, working on all sorts of spin-off and additional studies because of that. And so going back to your question though, I really don't see the mystical experience as being tied to the method necessarily that somebody takes to get to it, that it kind of stands independently. And we have all these different access points to the same thing. And whether that's, like I said, meditative practices, this hypnosis process that I'm describing, or a substance, I think there are actually three conditions that need to be met in order for a non ordinary state of consciousness to be occasioned, and then for a mystical experience to happen. So, this is something that we're about to publish. It's a theoretical framework of how to use mystical experiences in a therapeutic context or as a therapeutic tool. So, the three conditions first is there needs to be context, that the experience itself is happening within a context. In psychedelic literature, they call it the set and setting, right? So you could have you could take psychedelics, but if you're not in the right set and setting, then there's no guarantee that that's going to lead to any kind of mystical experience. You're just going to be tripping, and that's that. So that's important, is that context or the set and setting. You have the mindset to have a mystical experience, and you're in the setting or the environment for that to happen. The second one is that there needs to be some individual aptitude for those types of experiences. Somebody who is more spiritually minded, somebody who is more open to spiritual experiences, has maybe had a peak spiritual experience before, they're naturally going to be able to experience mystical experiences probably a little bit easier, a little bit better, just because of their background. And so everybody comes to the table with their own level of aptitude, their own innate ability. And you might have somebody with a really high aptitude that doesn't need much as far as method goes, that they can sit and meditate and enter into that mystical realm, whereas you have somebody on the other side of the coin who that's foreign to them, or they don't get into that very easily, and so they might require uh, a stronger method, maybe being psychedelics. And so seeing that there's that individual aptitude, and then the third thing, so we have the context, individual aptitude, and then the invitation, or this method of how we bring about the mystical experience. So I just described a couple of them. One very potent method is the use of psychedelic substances. Other methods might include meditation, hypnosis, anything that is going to help guide and facilitate that non ordinary state of consciousness, which is basically where we can shut off that filtration method and be open to that mystical realm that is always there. So, those are the three things that we kind of outline, and they interplay with each other to enable people to have mystical experiences.
Are you seeking a path to inner peace and personal transformation? Check out my website where I offer free weekly guided meditations designed to help you reconnect with your inner self and navigate your day with mindfulness. Whether you're new to meditation or looking to deepen your practice, our sessions provide a supportive space for growth. Join our community today and start your journey towards a more balanced and conscious life. Visit joegarner.net and sign up for our free weekly meditation. Find the link in the show notes. Now, I'm curious as to if I don't know if you can share this or not, but what were the set and setting, and how did you get these people into this mystical experience without any use of psychedelics in the preliminary study that you did?
Yes, glad you asked. Yeah, in the preliminary study, we looked at there were some research teams who had tried to hypnotically induce mystical type experiences, and we were able to learn very well by the things that they listed in their limitations, things that they wish they would have done differently. And so we basically took all of those limitations and made those the strengths of our study. For example, to really have a powerful set and setting, we decorated one of the research rooms in our laboratory to look like you're gonna have a psychedelic experience. Like it's there's like this massive tapestry on the wall, like this psychedelic art. We made this sign on the front that says, psychedelic research area, authorized personnel only. Like we just kind of went all out to make it look like, hey, this is the place. Like this is where you go when you're gonna have a psychedelic or a mystical experience. So we just kind of creating this environment that they find themselves in. We have this comfortable chair, this low lighting. There's like a rock cell lamp in the corner and like all this fun stuff. And we give them an eye mask, just like people do when they're doing psychedelic assisted therapy. You're given an eye mask that helps you to go inward. And so there's a lot of buildup ahead of time to create this environment. And we had somebody, with the clipboard and the lab coat who's like the researcher who's guiding them. And then we wanted the experience to not be associated with the scientist. We had the nice, friendly psychologist come in. That was me. And, dressed not like a scientist and just like normal psychologist clothes, I guess. And I led them through the experience. It started with 10 minutes it was Wim Hof breathing. So it's some really intense breath work just right at the beginning, which helps people kind of just like get out of themselves for a second. And then we went through this pretty lengthy hypnotic induction, really just a lot of progressive muscle relaxation, just helping them feel three things that we focused on, which was open. Uh, yes, I want you to feel a sense of trust, letting go, and be open. That was like our main suggestions: trust, let go, be open. And being able to facilitate that and kind of integrate that into the script that we used for the hypnotic induction. And then the rest of the experience were just a series of hypnotic inductions that were designed around the mystical experience questionnaire, the MEQ 30, like the actual questionnaire we knew we were going to give our participants, and really looking into those main areas of, okay, how do we create an experience that it gives a sense of awe, unity, transcendence of time and space, positive mood, and make it ineffable. What was most fascinating about this, though, is we collected a lot of qualitative data at the end. So we interviewed participants after the experience and wanted to know, what did you like? What was most powerful to you? Things like that. And what just boggled my mind was this idea that these participants reported having very profound, spiritual, different things that they experienced in the hypnosis process that I never said explicitly, that I never said out loud for them to experience. They, for whatever reason, their mind was able to create these experiences independent of what I was suggesting to them in the moment, which was really cool to see that once they kind of got there into that mystical state, it was personalized to them and what they needed. And that ended up being what was most profound for these individuals. So there's the long explanation for it. Yeah, we would re-alert them back to normal waking consciousness, have them fill out the questionnaires, do the interview, and then send them on their way. So there was a lot to do with that set and setting just on the onset. We designed a very powerful experience for them and then made sure that they were feeling upbeat and alert before they left. So that was the process from beginning to end.
That's incredible. That sounds like a fun experience for any of those participants for sure. And then it has to be incredible for you. I've led a few ceremonies and again I do meditations for groups of people. So like the feeling that you get when you're leading that experience, do you feel like you're making connections to these people, or do you just feel like you're essentially a vessel for something to kind of move through you and you're just allowing it to come through you so that they can, because I think this is an interesting that you're doing it in a clinical setting with guidelines and frameworks and stuff like that. When I'm guiding a meditation, the best and the most effective ones that I've done have been ones where I have no plan whatsoever when I come in. I get into that really, you know, deep meditative state. And then all of a sudden, there are words that are coming out of my mouth that sometimes I'm not even familiar with them. I'm not even familiar with the concepts. So, from your perspective, like, what is the, do you feel that you're speaking and having something kind of communicate through you? Or is it a very, um, specific and planned experience that you've had?
You're getting into a really important point, which is this this balance we have to do when we're running these experiments, which is when I'm doing the experiment, I have to follow a very sterile, standardized protocol so that we know that we have, uh, good research methods so that our results can be interpretable. So that's a bit of a limitation when doing the experiment. But once we know that that principle is there, then when I've adapted this and done it more personalized and in more of a clinical context rather than an experimental one, that's where I definitely feel, as you're explaining, like more of a vessel. And it is interesting to be attuned with the person I'm sitting across from, where I can feel like, just like you said, this flow of consciousness. Things are coming to me that I don't think I'm consciously and actively trying to come up with, but just allowing them to flow through me. So there, yeah, going to your point, when I'm doing the experimental procedures, it is very sterile and I'm just kind of hoping for the best, but still trying to be attuned. But then when I'm transferring those same principles over to more personalized and more clinical and therapeutic contexts, that's definitely where those those wonderful things can flow through me a lot better.
And you're still getting, in the sterile setting, you're still getting these mystical experiences. Like, people are filling out that questionnaire, and they're having what is clinically considered a mystical experience.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we saw that uh, we did just a very small sample this first go around, but it was either at the same rate or higher than a lot of we compared it to a lot of psilocybin studies looking at how many participants had complete mystical experiences based on certain criteria, and we found that we had the same very comparable results, which was encouraging. And then even looking at it on a more refined level, seeing that the experience we were able to facilitate in our study really matched very well how people feel and what they experience when they are on a high dose of psilocybin.
Hmm. It's just fascinating to see. Um,
Yeah.
as far as aptitude goes, have you done any research as far as, following the backgrounds of the participants and then understanding what their experience was? So if they come from a Christian background, are they experiencing a Christian tinted, like, I went and talked to, or I saw God, or versus more of a spiritual experience where they go see the universe, versus maybe like a Taoist experience where they go to the space of no time. Does that have some type of bearing on their experience?
Yeah. We're really on the same page here. I love it. So we are in the process of submitting a grant proposal for a study that we've designed where we're looking at exactly that. We're looking at, we're going to get information about people's backgrounds in two domains, which is their level of spirituality and then their religiosity. We're very curious, how does what happens to the mystical experience itself? How does it fluctuate? How does it differ based on somebody's spirituality and their religiosity? I'm very curious if we're going to see certain religious themes coming up across certain traditions. I'm very curious if, somebody who is very high in spirituality but low in religiosity, how that's going to affect things. So that is what we are proposing, is to actually measure that ahead of time so that we can see how does that augment their experience, and also kind of how does that influence their personal aptitude. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but this is all to say that one is in the works because I think I'm on the same page as you. Like, how does what we bring to the table affect ultimately the experience that we have.
Exactly. Yeah. What are the, again, if you look at it from like a neuroscientific standpoint, like how do the neural pathways that already exist in that human brain affect the way that they interpret and understand, whether it's the mystical experiences or what, again, how that affects just their normal waking experience in life? Because we all have these, a lot of people refer to them as these lenses, which I think the lenses are a good representation of the neural pathways that exist inside of your brain. The shortest route that your brain has figured out how to connect the different parts of your brain and how they interplay with each other. And each human being seems to have a different structure of their neural pathways, and they have the ability to change those neural pathways. So, as we start to understand this, I'm wondering if there's been any research, or if you know of any research of people seeing the neuroplasticity between pre-mystical experience, post-mystical experience, and how that might play into even going into like the education of children. Like, should children be having these mystical experiences or be induced into these mystical experiences? Because I think uh, what comes to mind to me are the Jesuits who say, give me a child before they're 7, and I'll give you a fully formed man. Like this is kind of, they understand the bringing children into these mystical experiences and being able to do that while their brain is forming, while they're still in that theta brainwave state as a forming human being, changes and alters the way that they show up in the world for the rest of their experience.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up some great points, and I would even venture to say that children are probably naturally way more prone to those types of experiences. They probably don't have the language developed well enough yet to describe that, but I think in thinking of how to even facilitate that more with children, I would say they're they probably have a better natural ability than us as developed adults. And being able to leverage that, but then also try to, discuss it with them in a way where they can explain it in the language that they do have. I've never really thought about that, but you mentioning that is truly fascinating. Um, I don't even have a good study designed in my head right now to look at that. But to your other points too, looking at uh, neuroplasticity, like that's a big part of the theory behind why ketamine assisted therapy works so well, is that there's this increase in brain fertilizer that allows for new pathways to form. And I would wonder if it's like this powerful experience itself is providing these new ways of being able to think and behave, and that gives us at least the foundation to change, right? That's really the purpose of all therapy and a lot of things we do, is to change. And so that's why it's so attractive to think that we can develop new pathways, is because that to us seems like a very sure way to achieve change. And so whether that's what's happening in what we do with mystical experiences, it's interesting because I don't know how much of that is the psychedelic substance itself, perhaps, or this very profound, formative, even corrective experience that can come through having a mystical experience. So I think we haven't quite teased that apart yet. At least if they have, I'm not aware of it, or I haven't read it yet. But I think that's an interesting area that a lot of the research is going into, is okay, how much of this is perhaps the substances themselves, and how much of this is the actual experience that we might have while on the substances.
Mm. Yeah. What comes to mind for me is um, the evolutionary benefits of the neuroplasticity, and how what it seems like would be finding this balance, that evolution kind of has to find this balance between complete neuroplasticity, where one day you're, this version of yourself, and then the next day you're this version of yourself. And to be able to reproduce as a species would be almost impossible in that scenario, because, you just have no idea. And then you bring a child into the world, and, one day you're this person, the next day you're this person, and that child has to be reared and has to be brought up in that space. So from like an evolutionary standpoint, there's probably this happy medium between the effects of whatever creates and builds this neuroplasticity, and the fact that it is very beneficial from an evolutionary standpoint to be very similar throughout your single lifetime. And I'm wondering if we're bumping up against that threshold here as we start to explore how fast can we actually grow, change, and move towards this higher version of ourself, or what a lot of people call in the spiritual community, like this fifth dimensional aspect of ourself. And I'm not sure if you're familiar kind of with those stories or terms, but there's this idea that essentially the human, all of humanity is going through this evolutionary process, and that it doesn't happen in the Darwinian form, but it happens because there's this shift in the field of consciousness that is humanity. So everybody kind of experiences this shift um, uh, at a subconscious or unconscious level. But all of a sudden, everybody wakes up and they're in this completely new reality. They're in this fifth dimensional reality where they have access to, or they're almost in this non-ordinary state of consciousness, or what we would call from the third density non-ordinary states of consciousness. But everybody is experiencing these non-ordinary states of consciousness, and we've now raised to a new level of humanity. So
It's almost like these non-ordinary states become more ordinary. They become more part of our regular reality and experience. Yeah, interesting.
yeah, that's the story kind of behind this shift in consciousness on the planet. And again, my podcast, the main theme is that we're going through this shift in consciousness. And I think from my perspective, it's very important to have these stories that humans can kind of hold on to. It's good to have the science as well, but I think the people that are going to be advancing consciousness the most effectively, and this is why I was excited to talk to you. When I saw you were accepting an award for IONS, which is the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which has been studying altered states of consciousness for the last 50 or 60 years. Um, you were the presenter that told the story well, that people could understand. The other two were scientists that gave very scientific understandings of what was happening when you go into non-ordinary states of consciousness. And it was basically the framework around how do we study non-ordinary states of consciousness. But you were the one that told the story well. And I think this is important because as we go through this shift, like, we need storytellers that are able to help people understand what is going on, maybe not from a biological standpoint, but from an idea that they can grasp onto. Like, oh, we're going through this, we're moving towards this fifth dimensional reality, or this fifth density reality, or we're starting to become aware of, we're not just this single species on a single planet, but we're actually a part. And it does seem like this is where we're moving towards with disclosure. I don't know if you saw any of the congressional hearings last week about essentially the unveiling that there is extraterrestrials on the planet, or interdimensional beings, whatever they might be, but they are here. We've been communicating with them. We have their technology that we're using right now. And we're starting to go from this idea that we're one single species on a single planet to we're in this tapestry of interdimensional or interplanetary, intersolar beings. And we're coming into this place where we get to join that collective, and we get to benefit from the awareness of that. And this is like, kind of goes into what I understand as far as raising your consciousness. It's just becoming aware of all the different parts of you that you are, including, at the cellular, atomic, subatomic level, and then going up higher into your family, your community, your state, or your economic system, and then going all the way up to the planetary, and then you get into the solar, and then galactic, and then universal awareness of what exactly you are. And I think this is, again, what we need is these storytellers that are able to tell this story of what is happening inside of each one of us on a personal level and on a collective level.
Yeah. Wow. I really like that. And I think, you're bringing in so many fantastic points there of this idea with, and I really truly believe there are a lot of parts that come together to create us, our consciousness, and that we are ourselves kind of dissociated mental complexes of a greater whole or more unified universal consciousness. And I I really like what you're talking about with this shift because I was sitting here reflecting on like my own experience with this shift and what I'm noticing. And I've just called it the psychedelic renaissance because I'm like, there is this shift, and that's the only thing I can really, you know, scientifically attach it to is like, okay, we're getting more accepting and we're using psychedelic substances more. But I think underlying that is exactly what you're referring to is this universal, more like global shift in consciousness, and I'm excited about that. So I really like those sentiments.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting to be alive on this planet right now. To be that individuated consciousness experiencing this kind of shift, and I'm I feel very lucky to kind of be a part of it, and just having that memory and coming back to that perspective that like I get to be alive during this time versus what some people are. It's like they're afraid that this shift is going to move us towards some bad outcome or something negative is going to happen. And, from my perspective, like you create the reality that you exist in. So if you believe that this shift is going to be a negative shift, then in the in the existence and the reality or inside of your mind, it does become this kind of negative shift. And we all get to experience the shift from whatever perspective that we have chosen to, or it's not even that you necessarily chose it, like, your brain just functions that way, and you're going to experience it in that way, so, yeah,
Right. And probably a lot of your background and culture is going to lead into that too. So, yeah.
exactly. Past experiences, past lives, your generational, experiences that, again, from a scientific standpoint is more or less proven, like, your
Oh,
genetic
yeah.
sequencing is dictated by, I think it's 16 um, generations back have an effect on your how your genes manifest, like what genes are turned on and off in your system, and it goes all the way back
Oof.
16 generations. So again, the idea of like generational trauma and all of this stuff um, isn't just this like neat psychological experiment. It's found in the study of these sciences, which genes, the epigenetic study of our human species.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm wondering if we can kind of take off the doctor's coat for right now and just kind of get into your beliefs as far as what you think as we go through whether this shift or as people just become more aware of their ability to have these mystical experiences, that they don't have to have them through psychedelic assisted, or go into a cave for 15 years and then all of a sudden now they have these mystical experiences. But it does seem like the delta between non-mystical and mystical experiences is starting to shorten. What does that do for humanity from your perspective? Like where is this moving us towards, and how does it play out over the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer to times and circumstances where, in order to survive psychologically, we're going to have a closer relationship and closer contact with the mystical or the spiritual. Being able to remember our inherent or like our true identity as these spiritual beings, having a human experience, and being able to rely on our ability to access those spiritual realms, those metaphysical realms, as a method of survival, and being I guess even surviving, but also thriving. Like yes, it can play has a place in surviving, but to be able to really thrive, I think that's the realm that we have to tap into. I think of the examples in my own life of people I look at and I think, wow, they are truly thriving. These are all people who have a very good, solid sense of their spiritual identity, that they have contact with those realms and with the metaphysical and even mystical regularly. And they use that to propel them in their physical world, that they use that to draw upon when they're met with challenges, when they need extra guidance and direction. And so being able to rely more on those inherent capacities and abilities is what's going to help us in, I think, as the world gets crazier and perhaps more polarized or divisive, however you look at it, it I think perhaps humanity as a whole, I don't know that it's headed in a good direction, like in the physical plane. And so when we're able to tap more into that spiritual aspect, that's what's going to help the most. So I'm curious if anything comes up for you in those sentiments, but that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of this idea there. In some of the spiritual circles, they talk about transcending the physical, and we're moving into this almost non-physical existence, which is that transcendence into the fifth density. That there's this splitting of timelines where the people that need to stay in the physical will stay in the physical, and they'll experience what you're talking about, which is kind of the divisiveness and the fall of this kind of world that we are familiar with. And then there's a group of people that are going to move kind of back towards the spiritual, be connected with the universal consciousness, and that some way, whether that is, and this is kind of a fun thought experiment, like how does that actually play out? Do we invent a technology that allows us to escape the human body? And again, this is kind of a little bit of what people talk about with singularity. Like they believe that the physical human vessel is a limiting factor in our ability to transcend consciousnesses. So their idea is basically, well, we should move our consciousness into a um, uh, instead of a carbon based, it would be a silicone based vessel that carries our consciousness. And from my perspective, that doesn't necessarily make sense, because if consciousness is this pervasive field around us, the fact that we are a human being is how we want to experience consciousness. We don't necessarily want to experience it. Like if we wanted to experience it through a silicon based experience, we would just download our consciousness into that silicon based experience, and that would be it. So I'm not 100% on board with that idea. And I think like Naval Harari talks a lot about this idea that kind of humans are this are the caterpillar towards this mechanical consciousness, and that our goal is to kind of take on that experience. But for me, it feels more like we're going to solve these problems in the human vessel, and it's going to look differently. The way that again, as you start to have these new technologies that are coming about that are based on quantum aspects versus Newtonian aspects, like 0 point energy, where basically you can draw energy from that 0 point field and use it however is needed. That is kind of the evolution of humanity, and that we have to evolve our spiritual understanding if we're going to continue to evolve these technologies. Because if you get into these technologies, these hyper powerful technologies with that individualistic mentality, then you basically just will end up destroying yourselves. Just like nuclear power can end the world if we don't develop this interconnectedness, or this understanding of we are all the same thing. We don't need to be fighting for scarce resources and land and all of these ideas that we currently have as a species. if we can't get past that, then eventually somebody's going to come in and, eradicate the human species, not because we need to be eradicated, but because it's just we haven't evolved enough to make that leap to this next phase of what humanity is or is capable of being.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here thinking about those implications and really the importance of now we're tasked with this idea of, okay, how do we disseminate this information in a way that people can connect with and be inspired by and want to cultivate in their own life? Like, how can people recognize the importance of this? And I think there are so many distractions and barriers that are actively working against this in society, that you have to break through first all of those initial barriers to even help someone be open to these ideas, and then from there coming up with methods or practices that help create that shift. So I think, I mean, the task to me, as I say it out loud, seems overwhelming, but I'm also excited by it because it seems very worthwhile and necessary, honestly. So that's just some of my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very purposeful endeavor for sure. Like it goes way deeper than just this is good for me, so I'm going to hold on to it and I'll be the one that ascends. Like you want to actually share this with as many people that are interested in it as possible, and I think that's what most people, like you said, like these very successful, these people that are thriving in their life, they're not thriving because they're hoarding all of these ideas to themselves. They're thriving because they're sharing these ideas with as many people as possible. I like to look at if you're familiar with Mind Valley and Vishen Lakhiani. He kind of started out doing meditation, and then he got into kind of these mystical experiences through a meditative state. And now he has this platform that has, I think, 100 million people on it. And he's teaching these ideas of how to use whether it's mystical or meditation or kind of like life visioning. And he has all these spiritual people on the program. He has all of these scientific people that have done the research on what it is. And the reason that he's thriving, the reason that he's been so successful is because he is openly sharing all of this information as much as he possibly can. And yeah, does he make a lot of money doing that? Of course. But that's the idea behind it. Like money flows to the ideas that progress humanity in a positive manner. And I think that's a good story to hold on to versus the idea that money flows to people who um, push down the little guy and steal as much from anybody else that they possibly can. Because you could have both those stories can be true from whatever perspective you're viewing them. So I think kind of changing that story to the money flows to whatever ideas are helping progress humanity towards this destiny that is either predestined or not predestined. Again, if you want to get into the free will discussion, that's always a fun topic to get into. But um,
Oh yeah.
either way, we're moving towards this future that exists where we all live in harmony, where we understand our place in the universe and understand our role in the universe, um, and that the people that are moving us towards that future are benefiting immensely from it.
Yeah. I think I'm reflecting too on, I feel like that is at at the core what a lot of religious traditions are trying to do. Like, their purpose is to create this shift or this elevation, this unity. And I know, at least for like a lot of the Christian religions, they they talk about this very massive monumental shift that is anticipated on coming, like the second coming of Christ, for example, of being this very momentous, this is like this big shift where now we are, of one heart, one mind. This is we're able to function way better as humanity and society because of this massive shift that we are anticipating is going to happen in the future. And I think about that and I feel like I see the benefit of framing it that way, but I also think we are responsible for that happening more so than, it just happening to us.
Mm.
It's just like we are, you know, in the certain circumstances where that happened, I think we are, as humanity and collectively, we are what catalyzes that.
Yeah, that's the age old idea of I think Dune, if you're familiar with the Dune movies and books, they really hit on that in the second Dune movie, where Timothy Chalamet's character does not want to be the savior because the savior is going to be the cause of all of this death and destruction. Like if he is this savior type being, nobody else will do any work. They'll think that he's going to save them, and they're not going to change or become better or be a different person. And they're putting that onus on something or someone else to change. And this is why like psychology has gotten it so right, is that if you want to change your world, you have to change you. You have to change what's inside of you. The external world is just a projection of what you are experiencing on the internal. Because if you get down to it, the default mode network, reticular activating system are taking your belief systems and imparting them, filtering everything else that doesn't go along with that belief and allowing in everything that does go along with that belief. And if you can change that perspective, if you can change the aperture of what you're allowing in, you will change. Your external reality will be different, fundamentally different. And that's just, that's where I think psychology has gotten it so right. And then then you have to, there's the clinical kind of dogmatic approach to psychology and not allowing practitioners to kind of do what they need to do to get in there because, there are certainly concerns, I think, of harming humans when you go into changing their way of viewing reality. And it has to be done in a certain way and all of that. But, with these mystical experiences, it feels like we're taking our hands off of the clinician to do that, and we're bringing the onus inside of the person instead of it being, because I'm sure the people that are being led by you in a very clinical setting, they're not like, oh, well, Cameron said these words and I experienced this. Like, they're not going to turn to you and say, thank you for providing this mystical experience for me. They're going to be like, this
Mm.
mystical experience was from inside of me, and that is going to change who they fundamentally are way more than, if they're a Christian, Jesus came down and healed me. Even that is giving away your salience, your like ownership of who you truly are.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's at least what I believe is one of our God given endowments is this sense of agency or free will. And so nothing, not even I think God can take that away or should take that away. And so I really like what you're mentioning with taking that ownership. And that's really what I saw in our research is came out with this very standardized method to facilitate mystical experiences, but then every individual person had a very unique experience that was independent and very different from what I was saying out loud to them in the room. And they, whatever, is inside them, their spirit, their consciousness knew what needed to happen or what type of experience needed to be occasioned so that the most profound and healing event could occur. So,
Yeah, it is really cool to kind of see that coming from, again, we're hitting it from all the different perspectives. There's people like you that are studying in a very clinical experience, and then there's people that are leading journeys in the Mexican desert, and they're taking people on these mystical experiences as well. So it's really cool to be able to have such a plethora, such a spectrum of experiences that you're capable of, and this is this is where I'm moving my platform is, to get people into the ability to meditate, and that meditation
Mm.
leads them to their ability to maybe have a minor or major mystical experience. And then as you have these more and more mystical experiences, you start to realize how interconnected everything is. And we're building this framework around um, the scientific community that through uh, quantum sciences that this is, we're understanding that this is actually what is happening. It's not just happening inside your mind anymore. Like there are, I guess, non-physical um methods and methodologies that are happening that we can study because, we're advancing in our ability to detect these methods and methodologies. And that's always been the issue with science, that the limitation to science has been our ability to measure things. That, before the microscope, we couldn't measure or see what a cell was. And then once we had that, it was like, oh, shoot, there's an entire world that just opens up. And then before the electron microscope, we couldn't see or detect what an atom was. And now we're detecting quantum experiences and quantum, uh, basically whatever quantum is, we're experiencing that, which again seems to be this field of consciousness, or whatever consciousness is riding on for existing on. That is what the quantum reality is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything you're saying just get me really excited. And I find the immense value in what individuals like yourself bring to the table, because I feel like us as scientists, we're so siloed and we have these great things that we're discovering, and just getting that to the public, we're terrible at that. And so being able to at least collaborate and figure out ways to bring this to the masses is like the next big step.
Yeah, yeah. Finding the storytellers, finding the people that can get that out so that people understand it, I think is definitely that next step. So, well, this has been an amazing conversation. I am just beyond excited that I got to chat with you, that we got to have this, and that, that we're so much on the same page. The things that I've been sharing and talking about and helping people understand are, there's scientific evidence behind this, and it's really awesome to
Yeah.
share that and to be able to kind of hear your journey and your story into where you are right now. It's a blessing for sure. Um, Anything you want to leave people with? Where can people find out a little bit more about what you're researching, find papers that you're putting out, anything that you have that you are able to share with us?
Yeah. My public presence right now is pretty poor. And I guess that's by design. I wanted to make sure that I had enough of a foundation built so that when I do try to, disseminate these findings and collaborate more with others, that I had something that I was built on already. And so I have like a ResearchGate profile, which has most of my papers that I've published are the full text article is available just for download. And uh, connecting with me personally, LinkedIn is an easy way, and I'm always looking forward to collaborating with like-minded individuals and even people who aren't like-minded. I love to hear the feedback and to be able to learn, because ultimately that's what's going to cultivate these types of conversations, is that interaction. So yeah, LinkedIn is a good place, but I'm working on trying to have more of a presence. That's in the works, but happy to chat with anybody.
Beautiful. Well, much appreciated on this conversation, and I have a feeling we'll probably be chatting again soon in 2025 as your field continues to advance and you've got new papers and all of that coming out. So
I would love that. Thank you.
cool. Well, you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.